Have you ever witnessed the exact moment the world changed forever? Not when a rocket launches or when a law is signed, but when a single, unexpected voice shatters everything we thought was true. If you were sitting in Harvard's grandest lecture hall that autumn afternoon, you would have seen it. The silence, the tension, the legend, and then a 9-year-old boy who dared to say, "I think you're wrong." Harvard's Sterling Auditorium was a living monument to intellectual ambition. Arched ceilings, aged wood, 1,000 eager minds. But on this day, a strange electricity crackled in the air. Hundreds of students, faculty, and international guests filled every seat. Lights shone hot on a marble stage as the cameras went live, ready to stream a historic mathematical reckoning to millions worldwide. On the stage stood Professor Arthur Linwood, the sort of legend whose mere presence altered the temperature of a room. His reputation spanned continents. The man who cracked the Drake-Polanski hypothesis at 26, who could reduce Nobel laureates to awe-struck silence. Rumor had it that if Linwood ever declared a problem unsolvable, the rest of the world would quietly agree. Linwood's eyes scanned the crowd, settling at last on a row of visiting prodigies from MIT, then the Russian Academy, and finally on a small, hooded figure nestled beside a woman in the back row, though he barely registered them. Instead, he turned to the enormous chalkboard, uncapped a marker, and wrote a question that had defeated the world's greatest for over a century. His voice, crisp and patient, rang out. Today, we confront the Behringer conjecture, unsolved for 117 years, and, as I intend to show you, unsolvable for all time. Notebooks snapped open, cameras zoomed in, social media streams lit up with hashtags, # Harvard Challenge, # Linwood Unsolved. Linwood paced, breaking down the ancient riddle. It begins with a sequence of primes. His hands danced, painting layers of numbers, symbols, and hidden patterns. He explained how generations had tried, how every supposed breakthrough ended in paradox or contradiction. Each new line of logic made the problem seem more impenetrable, more myth than math. After 20 minutes, the entire audience was nodding, half in awe, half in defeat. It wasn't just his intellect, it was the quiet certainty with which he dismissed hope. And now, Linwood said, chalk dusting his blazer, I close the circle. The structure collapses into contradiction. The sequence dies, the proof is absolute. No solution exists. Not now. Not ever. The words echoed, heavy as a verdict, a nervous ripple of applause. Some students shifted uncomfortably. A few sighed, marking the end of a dream. But in the back row, a boy's hand rose. 9-year-old Ezra Mallory was barely tall enough for his chair, feet swinging in blue sneakers. He wore a baggy crimson hoodie, fingers gripping a battered notebook. Next to him, his mother, Sophia, watched the stage with anxious pride. She was a visiting researcher at Harvard, and today's event was meant to be a treat for her math-loving son, not a battlefield. Ezra's eyes had never left the board. He chewed his pencil nervously, replaying every line, every symbol. Something didn't fit. A small, nagging itch in his mind grew stronger as Linwood spoke. And now, as the applause faded, he felt the urge to do the unthinkable. He whispered, "Excuse me, Professor. I think there's another way." The room turned. Linwood arched an eyebrow, amused but patient. "Yes, young man." Ezra's voice trembled but held steady. "You stop the sequence before it repeats. There's a pattern in the way the primes cluster. Look, it's not an ending, it's a loop." A few nearby students laughed gently. Others craned their necks in surprise. A 9-year-old? Here? In a sea of scholars? But Linwood, never one to dismiss a challenge outright, tilted his head. "A pattern, you say? Would you care to show us?" Ezra hesitated, but the challenge was too important. He slid off his chair, notebook clutched tight, and began his march down the long aisle. Every eye fixed on him, a hush descending as if the world itself were holding its breath. He climbed the steps, heart hammering, and faced the board. Linwood offered him a marker with a faint, encouraging smile. Half curiosity, half showmanship. Ezra took a deep breath, opened his notebook, and drew a looping pattern beneath Linwood's equations. His writing was uneven, but his hand didn't shake. "Here," he said, circling a spot Linwood had dismissed. "The pattern repeats every 293 digits. If you follow the sequence further, you see it folds back on itself, like a spiral, not a straight line." The hall was silent. Linwood frowned, analyzing the unexpected addition. A mathematics professor from Cambridge leaned forward, eyes wide. Students murmured, then fell silent again. Ezra's argument was simple, but his math was sound. He pointed to a set of prime clusters, numbers that shouldn't fit together, but somehow, when extended, snapped into place with a logic all their own. It wasn't just elegant, it was right. Linwood's fingers curled around his chin. His skepticism melted, replaced with an uneasy fascination. "What are you suggesting, Ezra?" Ezra swallowed. "You said it ends because the pattern breaks, but it doesn't. The break is just the beginning of a new sequence, one you can't see unless you let it loop." The professor scribbled, recalculated, then looked back at the boy, his certainty now visibly cracked. "Impossible," Linwood whispered, "unless." And in that moment, the auditorium erupted, voices rising, feet shuffling, reporters scrambling to capture the scene. A child had not only challenged Harvard's greatest, he had forced the legend himself to pause. But something else was happening too. Something far stranger than a boy genius upstaging a professor. From the shadows near the rear doors, a figure in a black coat watched, unseen by all but Ezra's mother. The man's eyes were fixed not on Linwood, not on the math, but on Ezra, cold, calculating, as if this moment was something he had been waiting for. Sophia felt a sudden chill. She reached for her phone, but the figure vanished just as quickly as he appeared. Back on stage, Linwood and Ezra worked together, chalk flying, numbers looping, the audience now swept up in the drama. The impossible was becoming possible, right before their eyes. The cameras zoomed in, the live stream exploded, and somewhere across the globe, mathematicians and cryptographers abandoned their dinners to watch a boy rewrite the future. Ezra's final step, a twist in the sequence, a mirrored code, made the impossible not just plausible, but inevitable. Linwood turned, breathless. "Ezra, what you've found isn't just a solution. It's an entirely new branch of mathematics." And then the applause, louder than before, raw and astonished, as if a dam had broken. But in the midst of celebration, Ezra's eyes drifted again to the shadowy corner, to where the strange man had stood. His mother clutched his shoulder, whispering, "Are you okay?" But Ezra was already thinking ahead, not just about math, but about mysteries that were suddenly, inexplicably, his to solve. As the crowd pressed forward, reporters, students, and even rival professors, Ezra felt something shift. He had solved the unsolvable, but he had also unlocked a door that could never be closed again. And outside, beneath the falling leaves of Cambridge, the real story was just beginning. How does it feel to shatter a wall the world thought unbreakable, only to realize you might have cracked something even bigger behind it? Ezra Mallory's world changed with a single answer. In the aftermath of his revelation, the auditorium pulsed with excitement and confusion. Voices overlapped. Microphones hovered like bees. The spotlight, once belonging to Professor Linwood, was now locked on a 9-year-old boy with wide, unsure eyes. As Linwood finished running Ezra's numbers, the last of his old certainty melted away. He turned to the crowd, voice trembling with a rare humility. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed is not merely a correction. It is a discovery. This is Ezra Mallory, a mind we all owe our deepest respect." The applause thundered. Ezra flinched, unused to such noise, but he forced a shy smile. He felt his mother's arms wrap around him from behind, trembling with relief and pride. Sophia's whisper, warm at his ear, nearly drowned out the chaos. "I always knew you were special, but not like this." Students crowded the stage, waving cell phones, snapping photos. Journalists jostled for position, shouting questions that Ezra could barely process. "Ezra, did you study this problem before today? How long did it take you to spot the pattern? Do you want to be a mathematician when you grow up?" He blinked, overwhelmed. All he'd ever wanted was to see if he could solve the puzzle. He hadn't expected to solve himself straight into the center of a media hurricane. Professor Linwood placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You'll need some air, young man. Come with me." Ezra nodded, grateful, but as he stepped off the stage, a different hand grabbed his arm, this one firmer, unfamiliar. It belonged to a security officer, radio buzzing at his hip, whispering something urgent into his sleeve. "Professor Linwood, Ms. Mallory, there's, a situation outside. We need to move you all to a secure area." Sophia's heart skipped. "What's happening?" The guard's voice was low, rehearsed. "Just a precaution. The crowd has grown outside. Press, some onlookers, nothing serious. Please this way. Please this." They were hustled through back corridors lined with dusty portraits of dead Harvard greats. Outside, Ezra heard the distant thrum of helicopters and the shouts of reporters echoing off the stone walls. The guard led them through a heavy security door, then up a narrow staircase that seemed to spiral forever. They emerged in a small, wood-paneled lounge overlooking Harvard Yard. Down below, an ocean of people had already gathered. Students waving handwritten signs, television crews jockeying for angles, news vans parked like invaders on the grass. A massive screen was replaying footage of the moment Ezra stood and challenged Linwood. Ezra pressed his forehead against the glass. It didn't feel real. He had gone from an anonymous kid in the back row to the boy genius the world couldn't stop talking about. His phone buzzed with dozens of notifications, school friends, teachers, even distant relatives suddenly appearing out of nowhere. His face and name were everywhere. Sophia sat beside him, brushing back his hair. "I'm so proud of you, Ez. But are you okay?" Ezra hesitated, searching her face. "Mom, is it okay if I'm scared? It feels like I did something wrong." Sophia hugged him tighter. "Of course it's okay. No one could expect you to be ready for this. But you didn't do anything wrong. You did something incredible." Professor Linwood, who had been speaking quietly with several university officials, turned and joined them. "Ezra, what you've accomplished. Well, I've never seen anything like it. But there's something you should know." He knelt, meeting Ezra's eyes. "You didn't just solve an old problem. You challenged the order of things. There are people, powerful people, who won't like that." Ezra frowned, confused. "Because of math?" Linwood offered a gentle, knowing smile. "Yes, because sometimes changing what's possible makes some very important people uncomfortable. That's not your fault, but you must be careful. You'll need allies." Suddenly, a deep, staticky voice came over Linwood's walkie-talkie. "Professor, there's a man here from the Department of Advanced Security. He says he must speak with you. Urgent." Linwood's brow furrowed. "Tell him we're with the Mallorys. Bring him up." Ezra felt the temperature drop as the heavy door opened and a tall, severe-looking man in a sharp gray suit entered. He flashed a badge. "Special Agent Lucas Trent, Department of Advanced Security. Professor Linwood, Ms. Mallory, Ezra." His tone was clinical, practiced. No warmth, only function. "We're here to make sure Ezra is safe. There are signals that his demonstration has triggered unexpected attention, both domestic and international. For now, I must ask that you remain on campus under university protection until we can assess the situation." Sophia bristled. "Is my son in danger?" Agent Trent's eyes softened, just a little. "Not directly, no. But this event has made headlines in ways we did not anticipate. There are observers, people with interests beyond mathematics. I'd advise you to stay out of sight for the next 24 hours. We'll handle the press." Ezra's mind raced. Observers? Was it about the math? Or about the strange feeling he'd had in the auditorium, when that shadowy man seemed to watch him with something like recognition? Linwood exchanged a glance with Sophia, then whispered, "We'll do as you say. But please, keep this boy safe." Trent nodded, then turned and left as quickly as he had appeared. The next few hours blurred into a strange, surreal fugue. The university whisked the Mallorys away to a small guest house. Ezra wasn't allowed to check the internet, but he overheard snippets from the radio. Unprecedented scenes at Harvard today as 9-year-old Ezra Mallory. A possible new approach to prime clustering has the mathematics world reeling. Security has been tightened around the Mallory family after the astonishing discovery went viral. Reporters knocked on every door. Some even tried to scale the garden wall. Anonymous calls flooded Sophia's phone. For the first time, Ezra's little world felt both enormous and very, very small. Night fell. Sophia tried to get Ezra to sleep, but he tossed and turned, unable to quiet his mind. The numbers replayed in his head, morphing, spiraling, twisting into patterns he'd never seen before. He thought about Linwood's warning and about Agent Trent's cold eyes. He wondered if the shadowy man from the auditorium was real or just a trick of nerves. As he drifted off, a strange dream came. He was standing on a narrow bridge made of numbers, above a swirling black sea. On the far side, a door opened, light spilled out, revealing a city of impossible shapes. But as he took a step forward, a hand reached out from the darkness, grabbing his shoulder. He woke with a gasp, heart pounding. Moonlight painted sharp lines on the ceiling. In the early morning, before dawn, Sophia slipped out to make coffee, and Ezra found himself alone in the guest house living room. The house was silent except for the hum of a refrigerator. He wandered to the window, peering out. There, by the hedge, stood the man in black from the lecture hall. Ezra froze. The man was motionless, half-shadowed by the trees, watching the house with unblinking intensity. Ezra couldn't see his face, but somehow he felt the man wasn't just watching. He was waiting. A surge of fear made Ezra's skin prickle. He stepped back, tripped over a rug, and fell with a small thud. When he scrambled to look again, the man was gone. His mind spun. He wanted to tell his mother, but what would he say? That he'd seen a shadow that disappeared? That the world outside was suddenly full of people who might want something from him? Ezra didn't feel like a genius now. He felt like a child. Small, uncertain, exposed. Later that morning, Agent Trent returned with new instructions. We've secured safe passage for your family to a location off campus. A secure car is waiting. Please bring only essentials. Ezra, you're to come with us. Sophia demanded, where are you taking him? To a place where he can be safe and where our experts can ask a few questions about his methods. There are government and university interests at stake, Ms. Mallory. This is standard protocol for exceptional cases. Sophia wanted to protest, but the logic of officialdom was a wall she couldn't climb. Ezra gathered his things, his notebook, a change of clothes, the small wooden puzzle box his mother had given him for luck. As he left, he took one last look at the garden, searching for any sign of the mysterious man. Nothing but dew and morning sun. The car that arrived was armored, windows tinted so dark that the world outside turned into vague shapes. Inside, Linwood squeezed Ezra's hand and promised, you're not alone in this. We'll figure out what's happening, together. The journey through Cambridge was eerily silent. Ezra watched the university fade behind him, the familiar replaced by the unknown. He wondered what came next, not just for him, but for everyone. If a child could upend the foundations of math, what else might be possible? And who exactly was waiting on the other side of the door he had just opened? As the car sped away from Harvard's storied halls, Ezra Mallory realized he had solved the unsolvable. But some puzzles weren't meant to be solved at all. And somewhere, in a darkened office in Washington, a phone rang. A voice answered, yes. The anomaly has been confirmed. Prepare Protocol Sigma. What if the answer you discover unlocks a question you never dared to ask? Ezra Mallory's new reality began with the metallic clang of a vault-like door closing behind him. The armored car had taken him and his mother to the edge of the city, where government badges and silent nods had guided them through a winding path of corridors and checkpoints. Now, after hours of travel, they found themselves deep underground in a place that didn't feel like any part of Harvard, or any part of the world they'd ever known. The research facility was a world of glass and steel. Every surface shone, every corner watched by cameras and silent men in suits. Scientists with color-coded badges moved quietly, clutching tablets and printouts. Ezra and Sophia were led into a conference room. Long glass table, cold light, a bowl of untouched fruit in the center, like a test no one dared to take. Agent Trent returned, this time without the forced warmth of his earlier tone. Ezra, Sophia, thank you for your cooperation. I know this is overwhelming, but we have urgent questions. A panel of mathematicians, cryptographers, and neurologists filed in. At the center, a quiet, elderly woman with sharp eyes introduced herself as Dr. Lorraine Park, director of the Mathematical Anomaly Task Force. Dr. Park's voice was gentle, but every word seemed calculated. Ezra, we need you to walk us through your thought process, how you saw the pattern no one else could see. Please take your time. There is no pressure. Ezra opened his battered notebook, hands trembling. He tried to explain how numbers moved in his mind, how they became shapes and colors, how patterns appeared to him not as calculations, but as living things, shifting and breathing. As he spoke, Dr. Park's team listened, sometimes glancing at each other in disbelief. Sophia watched protectively, eyes never leaving her son. Ezra, Dr. Park pressed gently, how long have you seen numbers this way? He hesitated. I don't remember when it started. It just always made sense. Like a song that gets stuck in your head, but it's not annoying, it's beautiful. And sometimes I just know what comes next. The room fell silent, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Hours passed. Ezra was led to a private room for rest, but sleep eluded him. The walls were lined with books, puzzles, screens, tempting but unfamiliar. Sophia was allowed to stay nearby, but not in the same room. The rules of the facility were strict. When Ezra finally drifted off, his dreams were stranger than ever. Numbers twisted into labyrinths, doors opened onto endless corridors, and always, always the shadowy man in black, waiting at the far end, his eyes burning like coals. Ezra woke with a start. The clock read 3:11 a.m. A faint tapping at the window caught his attention. He knew it was impossible. The room was underground, no windows to the outside world. Yet the sound persisted, a gentle, rhythmic knock. Ezra crept to the glass wall. Beyond it, in the dimly lit corridor, he saw a flicker of movement. Someone was out there. A figure, face obscured, stood perfectly still. A shiver ran down Ezra's spine. He reached for the intercom button, but something held him back. A strange calm, as if he was being told not to panic. The figure raised a hand, pressed something to the glass. A slip of paper, which stuck for a moment before falling to the ground. Then, just as quickly, the figure vanished. Ezra stared, heart pounding. Should he call for help? Should he try to get the paper? The facility's security was airtight. How could anyone leave a note like that? Curiosity got the better of him. He cracked the door, glancing around. The corridor was empty. No guards in sight. He darted out, scooped up the paper, and hurried back inside before anyone could see. The note was written in a delicate, looping hand. The pattern is a key. You are not the first. Trust no one. He is watching. L. Ezra's hands shook as he read it over and over. What did it mean? Who was L? Who was watching? He hid the note inside his pillowcase, heart racing. Every suspicion, every odd glance from the scientists, every moment of being studied, now felt sinister. He wondered, had he stepped into a test or a trap? The next day, tests began in earnest. Dr. Park's team ran Ezra through endless puzzles, mathematical games, even visual illusions meant to map his mind. They monitored his heartbeat, his brain waves, his eye movements. At first, Ezra played along. He solved their problems, sometimes in seconds. But as the hours dragged on, he grew wary. Whenever he answered too quickly, some of the scientists exchanged worried looks. Sometimes Agent Trent would appear behind the glass, talking urgently into his phone. During a break, Dr. Park brought Ezra a cup of tea and sat beside him. You know, Ezra, you've made a lot of people very excited and a few very scared, but you don't need to be afraid of us. We just want to understand how your mind works. Ezra looked up, searching her eyes for any sign of warmth. For a moment, he wanted to trust her, but the words of the note echoed in his mind. Trust no one. He sipped the tea, forcing a small smile. I just like math, Doctor. Park, that's all. She smiled back, but her eyes were wary now. That's all any of us want, Ezra, to know how the world works. But Ezra saw her jot something quick into her notebook, a line of symbols he didn't recognize. When the testing ended that day, Sophia was finally allowed to visit. She hugged Ezra fiercely, pressing her cheek against his hair. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "but I hate that you have to go through this. I just want you to be safe." Ezra clung to her. "Mom, do you think all of this is just about math?" She hesitated. I, I don't know, Ezra, but I promise, whatever happens, I'll always be here." Ezra nodded, but as he looked over his mother's shoulder, he saw Agent Trent speaking quietly with Dr. Park. Both glanced his way, then looked quickly away. That night, Ezra found the note again. He studied it for a long time, wondering about the mysterious L. Was it Lorraine Park? Was it the man in black? Someone else entirely? He couldn't sleep. The numbers wouldn't stop dancing. As the facility's lights dimmed and silence descended, Ezra heard a faint hum, a vibration in the walls, almost like music, almost like code. He scribbled in his notebook, letting the patterns pour out. The prime numbers became steps, the loops became paths. And then, as his pencil flew, a message emerged, not in words but in the arrangement itself. "The door opens for those who see." Ezra blinked. He hadn't written those words. The pattern itself, mapped out, formed the letters. It was as if someone, or something, was communicating through the math itself. He stared at the page, heart pounding, and whispered to the darkness, "Who are you?" In the corridor, the shadows seemed to ripple. Somewhere, far down the hall, a pair of eyes opened. Ezra understood in that moment. The problem he had solved was never about math. It was a key, a lock, a warning. And the true test had only just begun. If you discovered the world's greatest secret, would you protect it or set it free? Ezra Mallory had never felt more awake. As the hush of the facility pressed in, the hidden message in his notebook pulsed in his mind. "The door opens for those who see." It was nearly midnight when Ezra finally made his decision. He slipped the mysterious note marked L into his pocket, pocketed his notebook, and tiptoed into the corridor. Every step was a risk. Security cameras blinked in the corners. But Ezra's small size let him hug the walls, invisible in shadow. At the far end, where the artificial lights faded into blue gloom, a service elevator waited. Its doors slid open as Ezra approached, almost as if it was expecting him. He pressed the lowest button. The elevator descended deeper than any floor he'd seen before, stopping with a gentle thud. As the doors parted, Ezra gasped. He stepped into a chamber unlike anything in the upper facility. The walls pulsed with embedded equations and glowing prime spirals. Dozens of screens flickered with looping patterns, and in the center, a glass cylinder rose from the floor, housing what looked like an ancient, hand-carved stone tablet, covered in the same looping symbols Ezra had mapped. A figure stood waiting, the shadowy man in black. But as Ezra stepped closer, the man's face emerged from darkness, older than he'd expected, eyes gentle and piercing. He smiled, not menacing but sad, as if he'd watched 1,000 children take the same journey. "Ezra," the man said softly, "I am Leonard. I was once like you." Ezra clutched the note. "You left this for me." The warning Leonard nodded. "And you found it. That means you truly see, not just numbers, but the shape behind the numbers, like a melody no one else can hear. You're not alone, Ezra. There have been others. Not many, but enough for the world's most powerful people to fear you." Ezra glanced at the tablet, then at Leonard. "What is all this? Why me?" Leonard sat on a low bench, gesturing for Ezra to join him. "The pattern you solved isn't just mathematics. It's a code, a map left by people thousands of years ago. Every few generations, a mind appears who can see the code. Governments, corporations, even secret societies have spent centuries trying to find the next seer. They want to harness the code, control it." Ezra's head spun. "But why? What does it do?" Leonard's eyes filled with sorrow. "It's a key, Ezra. The tablet in the cylinder contains a sequence, numbers, primes, geometric patterns, that when understood unlock not just math, but the structure of reality. Imagine controlling chance, randomness, even fate. The people upstairs want to weaponize it, use it to manipulate economies, politics, even war. Ezra shivered. That's, that's wrong. Leonard nodded. That's why I ran. I found the tablet 50 years ago, as a boy. I solved the first layer, like you. They tried to keep me here too. I escaped. Since then, I've tried to protect those like us. Tried to warn them. Most were found, forced to serve, or simply disappeared. A chill ran through Ezra. He remembered Dr. Park's careful questions, Agent Trent's cold logic, the silent corridors, the protocol whispered on security radios. What happens now? Ezra whispered. Leonard stood, gentle but urgent. Now you choose. The code responds to your intention. You can show them how to unlock the rest, and the world will change, but not for the better. Or you can hide your gift, refuse to solve the final pattern. The code will go dormant, waiting for the next seer in another century. Ezra's heart hammered. Was he ready for this burden? All his life, math had been a safe place, a playground. Now it was a battlefield. He stared at the tablet. The symbols seemed to swirl, almost alive, inviting him to touch them. But he remembered the warning. Trust no one. His mind raced. His mother alone upstairs, Linwood's kindness, the other seers who'd vanished, the millions who might suffer if power fell into the wrong hands. Tears stung his eyes. I don't want to be the one who decides. Leonard rested a hand on his shoulder. No one ever does, Ezra. But history is made by those who choose, not those who wait. Ezra wiped his tears, breath trembling. If I leave it unsolved, will they let me go? Leonard's eyes darkened. They may try to keep you, but you'll have allies now, and I'll help you escape if you want. There are places where people like us can hide, learn, and grow. For a moment, the weight of the world pressed down. Ezra looked from Leonard to the tablet, past and future, fear and hope. He took a slow step back. I'm not ready. I won't solve it. Not for them. The code on the tablet flickered, almost as if it understood. The screens went dark. A deep, echoing tone reverberated through the chamber. Leonard smiled, relief and pride mixing in his tired face. That's the bravest answer. Suddenly alarms blared above. Heavy footsteps thudded on metal stairs. Security. Agent Trent. Dr. Park's voice echoing orders. Leonard turned, eyes fierce. Time to go, Ezra. Follow me quickly. They dashed down a hidden passage, winding through ancient tunnels that predated even Harvard's founding. In the chaos, Ezra could hear Dr. Park calling out, half pleading, half furious. Leonard led him up a rusted iron ladder, through a trap door, and out into the chill dawn of Cambridge. Freedom, but also exile. Sophia was waiting. Leonard had arranged it all. She swept Ezra into her arms, tears streaming. I'm sorry, Mom, Ezra whispered. I couldn't solve it. I had to protect everyone. Sophia only hugged him tighter. You protected the world, Ezra. That's more important than any equation. Leonard pressed a slip of paper into Ezra's hand. Coordinates. A network of people like them. Safe houses, secrets. You'll always be hunted, Ezra, but you'll never be alone. Ezra nodded, heart full of both dread and hope. As the sun rose over the old city, Ezra looked back one last time, at Harvard, at the world that would never understand what it had almost lost or gained. He didn't know what came next. Maybe another puzzle, another code, another door. But he knew at last what truly mattered. It wasn't about being the smartest or the first or the only. It was about choosing how to use what you could see. And sometimes the greatest answer is to keep the world's most dangerous questions unanswered.